Evercore Heroes is a pretty new game, but I still want to make this tier list. People are struggling with what characters they should play and what they shouldn't play, or what is easy to play and what is harder to play, and I decided to just make a tier list. Now, this is not based on how strong the characters are of themselves, because currently the meta is kind of very damage heavy, which would mean that we would have such boring characters on the top of the list, which I don't know. I'm not a fan of that. So instead of that, I decided to make a list on what characters are easy to play and what characters are harder to play. So let me make sure that the tier list is ready. Let's start with Becco, because Becco's here first on the list. Becco is really. It's hard to say, because with Becco, to get worth and value is kind of hard. Playing Becco the way you should play him is really easy though. I'm just gonna put him on easy because every ability speaks for itself. The Q is a heal, the W is a heal, the E can be used as a cleanse or as a confusing enemies. It speaks for itself, and then the ultimate is just one big heal as well. So there really is nothing hard about playing a Becco, apart from the fact that Becco is not in the meta currently. But I'm not really counting that. So Becco is by far the easiest character to play. Blink is medium-ish, and the reason I'm saying that is not because her kit is hard, but because he's kind of the jungler of the game. You roam around, you try and get value, you don't stay around with the team a lot, so you do have to have some knowledge about the game before playing her, but herself, like the character itself, is pretty easy. It's just the fact that you don't really play her apart from, roaming around the map. Clementine, stay away. Stay away from this character as much as you can. Not only is he in the current meta just kind of also, she's really hard to play. She is by far the hardest character in the game. Now, on the day that I'm recording this, she is like very bad at healing. Extremely bad at healing. Her other power-ups are pretty good, but it still requires your team to pick them up. Requires you to have almost perfect movement, because if you get hit, it's over for you. And you don't really have a consistent heal or consistent damage. So you have to really rely on your team and play around your team, which is just very hard to do. It's very hard to do. Especially since all her abilities take a few seconds to load up, and it can just go to waste in a few seconds as well. That makes her really hard to play. Cinder is also medium-ish. It's not the fact that he's hard to play. His kit is really easy to understand. It just requires you to move back and forth a lot, because his E and his ultimate are very up close and personal, and his W and his Q are requiring you to stay away a bit. Also, because he's a bit squishy, he might be really hard to play as well. But apart from that, his kit is so easy to understand that at that point it doesn't really matter. I do hope they do something with his kit. On the day of recording, he doesn't have any stuns or slows, which just kind of, it really makes him weaker than he could have been. Now, Finn is good for beginners. He is very easy to understand. All you have to do is just keep using your abilities on enemies, and that's it. When you're in trouble, you press R. That's basically all you have to do. It's the fact that you have to get everyone on your ass that, keeps him out of easy peasy. The fact that you have to lure everyone towards you instead of just letting other people do stuff for you like Becco can do. It still makes him a little harder than easy peasy, but he certainly is a good character to play for beginners. Grace is kind of hard, because her W also makes you untargetable for example, Cyrus in your team. And you have to use it at the right moment. Having an invincibility ability is really nice, and it's one of the strongest things in her kit, apart from the insane damage that she can do and the fact that she's hybrid. There is still a lot to understand. It's also the same reasoning as Blink. Blink has an easy kit and requires you to roam. Grace has kind of a hard kit and requires you to roam, which makes her a little harder than Blink. It still isn't completely hard to play her. You can still do really well even if you don't know much about her. That's not what I'm saying. It just requires you to have some knowledge of the game, have some knowledge about her, play her a few games, and after a while, you're just gonna be great. Kane. Now, Kane is a really hard character to decide because you have to E at the right times. You just have to keep resetting it. Kiting can be kind of hard. Um, his kit is also a little harder to understand, so I think I will put him on kind of hard as well. I think he's almost on the same level as Grace, and he's really not the character to play if he's not for you. If he's not for you, don't play him. You will notice as soon as you start playing him that he either is your character, your kind of character, or he is not. And he is kind of a weird breed because he's not ranged, but he's not too melee anyway, even though he doesn't have a melee weapon. It's a character that you can certainly pick up, but you know, he's not the easiest to play. Now Lotus requires you to do a lot of stuff, both damage and healing, but it's so easy, and without even looking at her kit once, you'll be able to do properly. It's the only thing that's hard for her. The only thing that's hard about her is her ultimate, because you're not going to be counting how long your seed has been on your teammate, so you don't always know when your ultimate will actually activate on your teammate or not. But apart from that, it's just really easy to understand. You just W, Q, E, Q, W, E, Q, W, auto attack, auto attack. I don't know what to say. It's just a very easy character to play. And she's currently the best healer as I'm recording this. I don't really like that because she's such an easy character to play. She's kind of the Moira of this game. She is so easy to do damage and healing with. So incredibly easy that it just kind of, you know, makes other healers less significant and less playable. I don't really like how she's dominating the meta currently, and I hope that changes. Alright, Max. Now for Max, I would say it's the same as Blink. His kit isn't too hard to understand. All you have to do is spam abilities. It's just the fact that you gotta roam around the map to make things work, you gotta know your positioning, and you gotta be able to take care of yourself in the search events, that he's kind of hard to play. He's not completely hard to play, he's alright. But overall, he is pretty medium. Now, Aurea, I personally find kind of hard. Not too hard, but the fact that she is a literal glass cannon. Well, she's not literally glass, but she is literally the definition of a glass cannon because she has no HP, but so much damage. You gotta be positioning yourself constantly. There are constantly monsters walking towards you, trying to get close with you, which you don't want because you will do less damage that way. Overall, she is really hard to play with a team that doesn't take care of the enemies and doesn't take any control of the enemy's aggro. Apart from that, she's okay, just the same, you know, like spam your abilities, hit the enemies, and your ultimate's gotta be timed right. Overall, it's the fact that you gotta stay away as much as possible from the enemy that makes her kind of hard to play. Now, Raimi is a really hard character to place, since his kit on paper sounds really hard, but once you play him, you start to understand that it really isn't that hard. I think that's also the reason why I will put him in medium. I don't find him that hard at all. The only thing that you're trying to take care of is managing your cooldowns, because you're gonna be automatically managing your amp. If you don't manage your amp, I don't know what you're doing. Like, it's easy. Once you are amped up all the way, you can only use your W, so then you only use your W. When you aren't amped up, you can just Q and E, and it really is that simple. So he's a pretty simple character, although the fact that you have to stay active at all times in order to keep him amped up, that makes him quite hard. Now, Riva is a character that I don't like myself, so for me it's stay away. But I do think that she might be able to be played by new players, but sorry, I'm getting called. Before you leave a comment, I know I have the best ringtone of all time. Yeah, this happens. Where were we? Riva. So for me, Riva is very hard to play. It's also because she's not like other tanks where you're just attacking everything. She's kind of a one-on-one tank, which makes her harder to play. Her Q can really screw you up sometimes. Sometimes you want to throw it further, but it stops at an enemy. And her ultimate can be placed weirdly. Apart from the fact that you're just standing there pressing E, I think it still requires you a bit of skill in order to play Riva right. I only know one Riva player in the entirety of the Evercore community. Hi, Peter. Anyway, going on, Shade. Shade is good for beginners. All you have to do is backstab, and the abilities speak for themselves. You know, Q being your blink, which you don't do damage with, W being a dash that does do damage, and an E just being a lot of damage. Her ultimate needs some work before it really fits within her kit, because now you just press it when there's a group of enemies and that's it. But apart from that, she's pretty simple to play. You know, she has a high skill ceiling, but a very low skill floor, so she's pretty easy to get into. Sky, medium. I would say Sky and Max require the same amount of skill. Now, of course, with Sky, there's also a very high skill ceiling. You can play her really well if you know everything in her kit. But if you don't, and if you just know how her abilities work a little bit in general, you can still do great. And overall, she's a very easy character to play. You just swap between water and thunder. Whenever you need mana, you can just go do water abilities. So she isn't really that hard to play, as people say that she is, but there is a lot of understanding that can be done in order to play her optimally. Optimally. Now, Sidian. For Sidian, I would say also, stay away. If you're new to the game and you play Sidian in your first game, it's gonna be hard. There's a lot of stuff to do with Sidian. You're constantly grouping up enemies, Eing them, ulting them at the right time. He also just feels kind of weak because of his W. His W is just a shield. And if you don't have any melee characters in your team, then you don't really need that. So even though, yeah, you can get away with spamming abilities, in order to play him really well, especially in search events, you need to learn a lot before playing Sidian. And another character I would say is Cyrus. Cyrus is my main. I love Cyrus. He's amazing. But the constant switch between healing and damage and when to do what is really hard to play. Maybe I'll make a guide on playing Cyrus at some point. If you want that, let me know in the comments down below. But the hardest thing about him is his Q and his R that make him completely vulnerable to any attacks because he can't do anything else anymore. And I'm getting called again. For the very last character we're gonna talk about, Zari. Now, we already talked about high skill ceilings and low skill floors. She is the lowest skill floor with a pretty okay skill ceiling. In order to play her perfectly, that's kind of hard. But if you come from any MOBA game, and that's kind of what I made this list from as well, then she's gonna be really easy to pick up. In fact, I think if you get a friend code and you only have the 4 characters being Becco, Zari, Shade, and Finn, I think from those 4 characters, the best one to pick up is definitely Zari. Zari does damage, just auto-attacking can get enough worth, sometimes pressing W and just spamming your abilities into the enemies while you try auto-attacking as much as possible. It's really simple, but you can really become a great Zari. I think Zari is a great character because of how big of a difference there is between her skill ceiling and skill floor. She doesn't have the highest skill ceiling in the game. I think that award will go to Cyrus, but his high skill ceiling still limits him, so I hope he gets a buff soon. But this is basically the list. So if we go through it, easy peasy. Becco, easiest character in the game to heal with. Lotus, easiest character in the game to heal and do damage with. Zari, easiest character in the game to do damage with. Finn, one of the easiest tanks, probably the most easy to understand tanks as well. Shade, your general assassin, pretty easy to play. Blink and Max are for the same reason kind of hard because you gotta be able to handle yourself. Cinder is really hard because of his kit being not really one-sided. You gotta be switching between close range and long range constantly. Raimi's hard because you have to be active all the time, which makes him medium because apart from that he's really easy. Sky is easy to play, okay, but to play really well, you can learn a few things. Maybe one day I'll make a skill ceiling tier list, because he would definitely be somewhere at the top. Then we have Grace, being kind of hard to understand, kind of hard to play, and you have to handle yourself most of the time. Same goes for Kane. You gotta be resetting his E every time you get the chance, and his W works weird, his Q works weird, his passive is kind of weird in my opinion, and Aurea being the literal glass cannon, which makes her hard to play. Clementine being very squishy and just taking long to do anything, not being able to do anything consistent, even though she does get better stats than Cyrus. Riva being the hardest tank because she's not like the other tanks. She's quirky, she's funny, and she thinks one-on-one combat is cooler than taking on an entire army by yourself, which you will have to get used to.
Sidian.
This is hard because you have to take care of an army by yourself without the resources that you think you'd be necessary. Of course, he does have the resources when you learn to play him, but if you don't learn to play him, it's gonna be really hard. Then Cyrus being one of the worst characters in the game, and being hard to play, and just having the most exposure in his abilities. Yeah, he really does deserve to be on that place of the list. I wish he was easier to play, and if you do want to play Cyrus, make sure to check out my stream, because that's what I do. Now, if you don't agree, then be my guest and leave. No, I'm kidding. If you don't agree with the list, be sure to let me know what you don't agree with, if there's anything that you would have done differently in the list. And I am looking forward to making more lists, so if you want to see something else, like a skill ceiling tier list, or just a general meta tier list, or just a general fun to play tier list, then I can make that too. It's up to you. Okay, well, thank you for watching, and I'll see you around. Bye!